Dr. Erlacher, your research suggests that present generation young people who've really come of age in the first decades of the 21st century, have a very different worldview, a different set of attitudes, beliefs, values than generations that have gone before. Could you just describe for us a little bit what you found? What are the attitudes? What's the worldview of the millennial generation?
Yeah, to really understand millennials and Generation Z, who's coming up after them, it's important to understand the historical context in which they're being raised and coming of age. So historians and culture experts talk about cultures and societies undergoing major cultural upheavals every 200, 300 years or so. So if you think back to the last major cultural upheaval in Western civilization, it was the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, the Industrial Revolution. And some of the things that came out of that period are really what are the foundation for American society today. It's the foundation of what businesses have been built on, organizations, institutions. So things like reliance on reason and logic to help us arrive at solutions, to find ways of problem solving, and to determine what is moral or ethical and appropriate. Really, the Industrial Revolution led us to this place of organization and structure and having systems and policies that could help us achieve great things. So there was this mentality that really committing to an organization or institution was an ethical and a moral thing because it was going to contribute to greater good in some way. It was going to help solve a problem. So postmodernism, which has been around for a century or so in academic circles, was really ushered into popular culture in the 60s and 70s by boomers. And as a result, millennials who were born around the 1980s and till the 1990s really were the first generation that I call postmodern natives. So they were raised under a postmodern mindset, which really looked at kind of questioning the ideas of the Industrial Revolution and Enlightenment. And therefore, they're coming in with a little bit different mindset on how we approach solving the world's problems and how we approach behaving in our society.
The ethics of the Enlightenment was very much an ethics of rules.
Yes.
That, as you say, that rationalistic view, maximize overall utility or the categorical imperative or whatever. And it seems to me that in business settings, ethics is very much of that model. Ethics is all about compliance, follow the rules. And to be ethical in business, in many views, and probably in the standard view out there, is pretty mechanical, as you suggest. Know the rules, apply them, and act accordingly. And it doesn't take much to be ethical in that setting. Could you talk a little bit about how that context might be a disconnect for the millennial generations?
So part of the postmodern mindset is really to question things and to deconstruct things. And as a result, that deconstruction gets applied to these policies and these rules and these institutions. So whereas previous generations really came into as institutions saying, how do I apply and adapt myself to the institution, adjust to the rules and the policies and follow them, younger generations are really coming into institutions with this mindset of questioning, why do these policies exist? Are they effective policies? And if they contradict my values and my worldview, then it is moral and ethical to violate those policies and those rules.
as a boomer generation, we too thought we were coming up in an age of enlightenment. We were gonna remake the world, and we found, I think, quickly that that's not always possible. So again, from the young people you've spoken to, what happens when that disconnect occurs, when they find themselves, particularly in a workplace setting, and there is a disconnect between the expectations of rule following and the expectations of a younger generation to challenge, to question, to deconstruct? How does that play out?
Well, previous generations, because there was kind of this faith in absolute universal truths or facts that could be proven and discovered, older generations were really comfortable with just responding to those policies and kind of looking to rules and kind of moral codes to help guide their decision making. What's happening now with the postmodern generation is this whole idea of tolerance and acceptance of a variety of truths as being equal, and everyone's perspective having validity. And as a result, they really define their truth in the context of communities. So often they are going to colleagues, friends, what feels good. Okay, it's no longer reason and logic. It's more what feels good to me, because we've kind of set that aside and we're responding more out of our emotion and out of relationship than we are out of reason and logic and rules.
Speaking to the business community, how do we prepare for the influx of these young people? And how do we build that community? How do we create a community that can be ethical? Because, I mean, as we know, corporate cultures can be good and they can reinforce good behavior, but they can also reinforce the bad behavior. And I'm thinking of just today's headlines, a corporate culture in Germany, where cheating was just expected.
Yep. I think there's really two parts to that. One is with tolerance and this acceptance of a variety of truths as being equal, what happens is a lot of young people don't have a personal sense of conviction. They don't know why they make the decisions they make. And when you look at Kohlberg and others who studied moral development, they weren't so concerned with the answer, is it right or wrong, but with the process and the reasons behind why individuals make decisions. And today, young people are inundated with information. They're receiving very shallow snippets of information, not necessarily the whole picture. And so often they're making decisions based on information they're getting on their news feed or from their group of peers, and it's very shallow, it's quick, and they don't have a deep developed personal sense of conviction. And so one thing I would really encourage, both on the campus as well as in the corporations, is to really facilitate conversations where young leaders have to think through the reasons behind their decision making. So often what we do is we have leaders who have been in an organization or a corporation for many years making the policies. I think, and then along with that is, really in those corporations, inviting young people into the conversations also helps facilitate that sense of community that you're talking about.
Ethics sometimes is assumed to be about answers, having the right answer, making the right decision. And I hear you saying that in a world that's a little more ambiguous and perhaps chaotic, ethics is at least as much about decision making and process rather than outcome or content. And as businesses think about preparing themselves, creating a culture in which ethical behavior gets reinforced, the emphasis might be on decision making and not a set of right answers or wrong answers. Some advice perhaps for the students as they're anticipating entering into the workplace, entering into a career, hopefully that they can find meaning and value in their lives. Given what you've said and given what you've learned about millennials, what ought they be doing? What ought you be doing as you think about ethics, particularly in the workplace?
And speaking to millennials, I would say continue to ask those questions, why? And ask why you make the decisions that you make. Look at your everyday behavior. Why do you choose to take the classes that you take, or hang out with the friends that you hang out with, or respond a certain way in your part-time job? Often we just respond based on what feels good in the situation, or we respond based on how our peers are going to view it or what our peers approve of. But really, what is your personal conviction? And that's something that we really need to develop, because if we are responding simply to emotion or to peers, those things change from moment to moment. So one of the things that millennials really do well in regards to ethical decision making is having a sense of humility, having a sense of moral imagination, because they've been taught to be tolerant. But sometimes what millennials you can lack in your decision making is that personal integrity and courage to act out of a personal conviction, even if it's going to contradict others around you. And so really, as you're in college now, find mentors who will ask you difficult questions. Put yourself in positions where you have to make decisions, and have people in your life who will ask you about the decisions you're making. Take time, this is something we don't do in our society very much, but take time to reflect on why you behave the way that you behave, and really develop that personal conviction that you can act out of in contexts that you'll find yourself in the future.
To be self-critical about it, I think, is important. And to say that there's no right or wrong answers isn't to say that there aren't good and bad answers, and good and bad ways to think about it and reason about it.